Now available, paperback and Kindle Unlimited, ISIS, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage when the goddess next door steps in the squared circle with the beast from the boss in this action-packed all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, the main event, paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. In the media scrum after the end of WrestleMania 39, Triple H, the head of creative at WWE, said that stories do not end. And I have to say that Triple H is being extremely disingenuous when he says that stories do not end. As a writer who has been working on over 80 books in the course of 25 years, I know that all stories end, and stories end with the conclusion of a story. This is a basic thing that I learned way back in high school and had further cemented to me in books about writing such as Sid Field's screenplay and Robert McKee's story. And a story has to have an end in order for a writer to begin a new story. And that's why I have to say Triple H was being extremely disingenuous by saying that the story between Roman Reigns hadn't ended, and to say that the story did not end was just absolutely wrong, because as most people saw, the timing for the story for Roman Reigns to end was with his defeat at the hands of Cody Rhodes. However, WWE wants to go out here and continue the story of Roman Reigns, even though the audience has basically said they want to see the conclusion of the story. Now, I believe that Vince McMahon wants to continue the story of Roman Reigns, one, because he wants to sate his ego, and two, because he is extremely greedy and believes that he can continue to stretch this story for an extended period of time. Now, this is a mistake that many writers go out here and make and believe that they can continue to stretch a story. However, a smart writer knows the faster they end the story, the faster they can go out here and begin a new one. This is something that I've learned from my over 25 years of experience. I've learned that sometimes it's better to end a story early with a satisfying conclusion rather than stretch a story too long and wind up losing the audience. And what Vince McMahon did when he went out here and booked the ending of WrestleMania 39 was basically go out here and look to stretch the story. And as he looked to stretch the story, he has basically done what many bad writers do, look to take a story longer than it needs to go and looks to end it on a period instead of an exclamation point. Now, there's a difference between ending a story on a period and an exclamation point, and any good writer knows when you end a story on an exclamation point because you want the reader or the audience to know that there's going to be more in the future possibly, and you want to build their anticipation for more. Because if you build their anticipation for more, they are still eager and excited to see more of the characters in more adventures. But if you end the story on a period, the reader or the audience becomes apathetic and they don't want to see any more. Now, ending the story on an exclamation point, again, this is an instinctive thing that a writer knows. They have to know, okay, I've got the audience at the height of their interest, and if I end it here, they will still be interested. However, if a writer continues to try to put more onto a story and bog it down, what will happen is that the audience will just start to lose interest because they don't see a conclusion that satisfies their feelings about things being resolved. And if they can't get a satisfactory resolution, they see that the story, in their eyes, is going nowhere. Now, examples of bogging a story down were shown to me in Matt Reeves' The Batman. And in Matt Reeves' The Batman, we saw a story that was very intriguing, but the third act basically got bogged down. After the Riddler was arrested, we got a longer third act than was needed, and this longer third act basically slowed down a very decent movie and turned a great movie into a good one. And that was a sad part about the Batman. Now, that was one example of what happens when a writer does not know when to end a story. Another example to me was what happened with the Superman movies. And what happened with the Superman movies was that greed overtook the Salkins. And as greed overtook the Salkins, what happened was they got so greedy for box office, they fired Richard Donner, who was making Superman 2, installed Richard Lester for Superman 3, went in a new direction hoping to get more box office, and the Superman movies went out instead of with a bang, but went out with a whimper. Now, that was the reason why Superman fell off in the 80s and did not have the satisfying ending of Return of the Jedi, which knew when to end. And again, endings are good for a story because endings mean the story is over. And again, Vince McMahon doesn't know when to end the Roman Reigns story, and he's saying that it's the third inning, but the audience checked out at WrestleMania 39. And because the audience checked out at WrestleMania 39, they are no longer interested in the Roman Reigns story. They are no longer interested in seeing any more parts of the Roman Reigns story. They have seen it for 2.5 years. They wanted the exclamation point. They wanted the finish. Unfortunately, Vince McMahon didn't want to give people the finish because he was too greedy. And again, as a writer, I know what happens when you get too greedy because you're getting this attention and you want to think, oh, I'm going to try to pad this out. And that's always a decision a bad writer makes because a smart writer knows when to end a story. This was something I had to do with the E-Steam series. Now, the Devilish Diva era of E-Steam was very popular, and I remember getting over close to a couple thousand downloads on Smashwords for books like Demons Anonymous and Fairy Tale, and I had to realize that I couldn't keep the Eaststeam character going as the Devilish Diva when I wrote Witches of Eastland. When I wrote Witches of Eastland, I realized that the second plot point had been met, and when I met that second plot point, I had to get towards the conclusion of the first story arc. I understood that if I continued to pad out the Devilish Diva era, I would have damaged the character. Now, I really liked writing Devilish Diva E-Steam stories, but the direction I was going in, I had already met the plot point that I had made in Witches of Eastland about E-Steam coming to terms with being human, and I could not go any further with that story. And while I wanted to keep going with that character because it was still popular, I said to myself, I can't do this. I have to respect where I'm going with the character and end on the exclamation point. And that's why I wrote E-Steam Ascension. I realized that even though I like doing this character in the Devilish Diva era, I cannot go against the way the story is written, and I have to end the story in order to begin another direction for the character, and I have to stay true to the mission that I had for the character, which was showing how a new follower of the Most High grows in her relationship with the Messiah and the Most High. I had to stay true to the character, and I had to go and stop thinking about, oh, the character is getting popular. I had to think about what was in the best interest of the character, and that's why I had to write the E-Steam Ascension story and conclude that character's character transformation arc. Unfortunately, what's happened with Vince McMahon is he's thinking, I'm going to get more pay-per-view money, I'm going to be able to keep this story going, I'm going to continue to push Roman, but Roman's run has run its course, and when you run a character too long, what happens is that you start running out of ideas, and what happens with a character that you run out of ideas with and you run out of road, and the character has no place else to go. And that's basically where Roman Reigns will be in a couple of months. He's going to be running out of opponents, and he's going to run out of credibility. And while he may meet the mission of wreck everybody and leave, he will leave WWE in ruins, because stories are about endings and beginnings. and WrestleMania was supposed to be about ending Roman's story, and it was supposed to be about beginning Cody Rhodes' story, so that you could go out here and build new feuds with new stars like Gunther and people like a possible returning Randy Orton and other heels. It was about building new stories so that you could move the WWE into a fresh direction after 2 years of this character running roughshod. This character has basically, again, run through all of the opponents, has all the belts, and those belts lose prestige and value because this wrestler has been on too long. And again, when your story goes too long, what happens is the audience loses interest, and the audience loses interest because you run out of story to tell, because you're not clear on your message and you're not clear on your points. A good writer understands, okay, once I've made all my points, I wrap up the story, and when I wrap up the story, I'm wrapping it up because I want to be able to tell more stories. Moreover, I want to be able to use these characters later on in another story, and in order to keep those characters fresh, I need to go out here and respect the lines and boundaries of a good story arc. A good writer understands, okay, I need to respect these lines, and I need to understand, okay, I may feel a certain way about a character, but once these story points are made, I need to go out here and conclude this story. And once I conclude this story, I am done with this story. And I'm done because I want to be able to tell more stories. But Vince McMahon, an old boomer stuck in the past, doesn't want to let go of this story. And the sad part is he wound up doing damage to his own brand. And again, Triple H trying to cover for him, saying, oh, the stories don't end. No, stories have to end. And if stories do not end, you wind up alienating your audience, and you wind up not answering the critical question that every screenwriter like myself has to answer before we put a finger to the keyboard, and that is, why should we care? It's hard to care about WWE at this point, because if there's no end to a story like that of The Undertaker, which Mark Calloway clearly ended the story. He said, okay, I am done. The gear is in the center of the ring. It signifies that I am finished. It signifies that the dead man era is over. It signifies that he is done. That was a symbolic end. And then he had Mark Calloway come out on the 1000th episode of Raw and pass the torch to Bray Wyatt, sadly, again, signifying the end of The Undertaker. And again, that was an end and a satisfying conclusion to the story. And it's the end that people want to see. And again, when you're a bad writer, you don't understand that if you don't end the story, the audience will end it for you. And when the audience ends it for you, it's usually in an ignominious fashion, like the way the Salkins wound up ending the Superman story with Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, or the way Joel Schumacher and Warner Brothers ended it with Batman and Robin. That's when the audience walked away from those stories because they were tired of those stories, and because the writers had run out of road to tell stories. What happened was those brands wound up falling apart. Again, a good writer knows when to end a story, and they know when to put a period at the end of a story as related to certain stories, but the smartest writers, what we do is we want to end on an exclamation point, and we want to end on an exclamation point the same way Paul Dini and Bruce Timm ended JLU on Destroyer. JLU Destroyer was a textbook example of ending a story on top and with an up note, because at the end of Destroyer, people were satisfied with the Justice League, and they were satisfied with the end of JLU, and they were anticipating, oh, there may be a chance at us seeing more stories, but the overall story of the DC animated universe ended on a satisfying high note, and you want to end on a high note because a high note, again, makes people anticipate more, and you want to be able to have people anticipating more. And whenever I write a story, I always try to end on an up note, saying, okay, the story for this character is ended, but there's chances that you may see this character again, and that's why I always leave characters in last known good condition, because I may want to revisit those characters with another story, and the audience may want to see these characters again. So ending on an up note is always the best way to go. I mean, that's the way George Lucas went with Return of the Jedi in '83. Ending on that up note, they defeated the Empire. Everybody's alive. Everybody's got a chance. We've got a chance of seeing our friends again. And that's what people want in storytelling. They want the story to end on a high note, and they want the story to end in an organic fashion where they get that exclamation point. They want that payoff. And again, the end is the payoff for the audience at the end of the story. It is where they see the entire story come to a satisfying conclusion. And if they don't see the story come to a satisfying conclusion, and they see a writer trying to drag stuff out, what they do is they, again, tune out because they wanted that payoff. And that's something a writer has to understand. Your job when you start a story is to pay the reader off, and your job is to pay the reader off and give them a satisfying conclusion that has them asking for more, not looking to walk out the door and never return. The last thing you want as a writer is to have people starting to walk away like we had at WrestleMania 39, unsatisfied, and at the beginning of Raw after WrestleMania. You don't want your readers or your audience to be sitting there disgusted and angry, because disgusted and angry people aren't going to finish the story. I mean, they may be saying, "Oh, there's 9 innings that's related to Roman Reigns, and there's we're in the 3rd inning," but people are getting up and walking away. People are turning off their TV, so there's nobody coming to go see the other 6 innings. And again, this is why you have to have a good instinctive mind as related to ending a story. This is something that I have learned for many years from working on different stories, knowing where the end is and knowing where to put that exclamation point as related to that conclusion, and giving those readers that audience a reason to see, okay, he's ending the story, and he's ending the story hoping to begin a new one that will allow me to see these characters and be able to have a great time with them once again. Again, all stories have an end, but all stories that end lead to better beginnings. And again, an ending is supposed to lead to a beginning, and every story, if it does not end, is not a story anybody cares to tell again. Because if it's still going, then I cannot tell that story, and I can't tell that story because it hasn't ended yet. Now, if you want to pick up some of my action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and my vampire novel Eternal Night, and my sorority novel The Thetas, and my business novel A Recipe for Success, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos about wrestling and writing and comics, science fiction, and fantasy, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s with this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, 1987 at online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.